my childs, welcome back to another story time. This time we're diving deep, probably the deepest into my personal life we've ever been. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all the time my crush thought I was a stalker. I've wanted to tell this story for a little while, as I think you'll find it really interesting, and today I'm finally doing it. So 2 years ago, I met this boy. We'll call him Bob, I guess. He was in my middle school class. Now there was also this girl in our class. We'll call her Ava. Ava and Bob have been friends for a while, about 5 years at this point, though they acted like siblings more than anything. Throughout the year, I got more and more cautious of Bob and closer with Ava. She became a good friend of mine, despite the fact that I was uncomfortable how often she seemed to engage in gossip and read my mind, really. A few months passed and things were going very nicely. Ava was a good friend to have because she was pretty popular and had a way of finding out the latest news around the school. She was always kind to me too and looked out for me, which is the important thing. Maybe around March, things began getting even better. This was because I was starting to see another side to Bob. Some of his short temper could probably be explained by feeling insecure at my school because it was his first year there. We started talking a little bit more and I noticed him slowly getting more open with me. I guess you could say I got more comfortable with his company as well. We got on platonically without any conflict for a while, and I was starting to have a soft spot for him in my heart. One day the teacher decided to pair us up in a group project, and that's when everything changed. This particular group project was a cause of much stress for me, as the other group members never took responsibility for any part of the project. Most of the time was spent trying to get them to stop messing around and distracting us from our goal even farther. Every other group was staying on task and doing well on the project, and I, as an insecure middle schooler, couldn't help comparing myself to them. I was dreading the big presentation we'd have to give in front of the entire class. Because of the pace we were going, I didn't think we'd have anything to present. During the work time given during the school day for this project, I would slowly get more and more distressed. I think Bob, who as previously mentioned was in this group, and not one of the members who was being distracting, I should add, noticed this. He tried to make sure I remained as calm as possible, tried to give me easier parts of the project to complete, etc. I really appreciate his kindness towards me during this project, even now. As the days went by, I could really see his care for me growing, and I felt something inside me. It was care for him too, but a bit more than that as well. Yep, I had a crush on Bob. I'm happy to say that thanks to him, we completed that project, and even though our presentation wasn't the best, it wasn't bad either. Bob and I kept our closeness for the most part after that, and though I don't remember when, Ava soon found out my feelings for her longtime friend. She found it a bit odd, of course, but respected it, which I was grateful for. Anyway, just something I thought I'd mention. Back to Bob now. Our closeness remained, yes, but our relationship was certainly confusing to me at some times. Sometimes we got on as friends, some days it would seem he thought of me as something more. Then other times he wouldn't really show any interest in me, platonically or not. Though, to my relief, the school year ended with him asking for my phone number and constantly sitting next to me throughout the last day of school. So it was looking pretty good for us, and I couldn't remember ever feeling so happy. We called over the summer, and I went to a couple of his baseball games to support him. He showed only kindness and gratitude towards me. That it's still a mystery to me how he changed up so quickly. The start of the next school year was when things started to go downhill. Said school year was this past one, by the way. The first day of school, I was excited to see him, but to my dismay, he wasn't there. Ava or somebody ended up telling me he was on vacation. I was a bit disappointed as his last baseball game had been about a month ago and I hadn't seen him since then. So I just sent off a quick message through the school email telling him I missed seeing him at school and I hoped he was having a good vacation. You know, normal stuff. Even if I hadn't liked him and he hadn't known it, it's nothing out of the ordinary that I'd send to just a platonic friend of mine. He never ended up responding though, and I just assumed he hadn't checked his email because, let's be honest, I think I'm the only one at my school who does. The next day of school he was back, and I asked him if he'd seen my email. To my surprise, his response was, "Yes, but I saw it was from you and deleted it." I was hurt by this, and it seemed he knew it because he hastily added, "I knew you'd talk about it." I was still wondering why he couldn't at least say a quick thank you or something casual like that. After this exchange, he seemed more distant from me than usual, doing things like making an effort to sit next to my best friend and all. The words he'd spoken that hurt worse than if he'd punched me lingered in my head until I decided to talk it out with him. I calmly told him why it had hurt me, and he truly seemed to feel some sort of regret as he responded with a soft, concerned tone. He suggested we call after school that day to make up for it, and I thanked him and agreed happily. That's what we did, and during the call, he made sure that we'd worked everything out. It seemed he genuinely cared about our relationship, and besides everything we'd already been through, that made me like him and admire him more. It didn't last long, though. Things were still a little bit uncomfortable between us, but it wasn't exactly a toxic situation, as I still liked him and he was still respectful towards me. Not long after all this had happened and the conflict had been supposedly resolved, Ava disappeared. Disappeared. She wasn't at school for about 2 weeks and everyone was worried about her. I don't really think she had a great home life, which I totally empathize for, so there would be periods of time when she wasn't at school for a few days. But this was a long time she'd been gone, and it wasn't normal. So when she finally returned, I wanted to make sure she was okay. I found out she'd gotten into a car crash, but she'd recovered. At first break time, I went over to her to catch up, but her response to this gesture wasn't what I'd expected. She ran backwards away from me, a strange look on her face as she told me to stay away from her. I was confused more than anything and asked her what was going on. Ava told me that her mom thought I was telling my best friend to bully Ava because of some idea in my head that she was Bob's girlfriend. Obviously, I thought nothing of the sort and was appalled when Ava informed me she wasn't allowed to interact with me anymore for this reason. Her mom had never even met me, so the only possible way she could have made that assumption is if Ava had made up that situation. I respected this decision of Ava's, of course, no matter how much the betrayal hurt me. I did, though, think it was important to make sure Bob knew about this, since the situation involved him in a way. My surprise skyrocketed when I discovered he had known about this for a long time and was uncomfortable around me because Ava had told him I'd asked where he lived. If you know me, you'll know I would never do anything of the sort, nor would I ever tell my best friend to bully anyone. I tried to explain this to Bob, but he refused to listen. I was disappointed he had believed Ava's story, despite how long he'd already known me, but I still cared deeply for him. I thought it must be a misunderstanding and we could work it out. Things with Ava were getting constantly worse, though, because she'd started spreading a rumor about how I was supposedly stalking Bob. Bob started ignoring me altogether and answering cautiously and curtly when I did try to talk to him. There's an area undercover at my school where almost all the middle school boys, including Bob, go to play soccer at break times. I would usually go over there to watch the soccer games, which was the foundation of the rumor that I was stalking Bob. In reality, I was just going over there to watch the boys in my class play soccer and support them, as well as the 30 or so other kids over there at that time. Still, the rumor was spreading through my class crazy fast. I decided to write Bob a note covering many things. I told him how it was up to him what to believe, and I couldn't impact that decision, but I was hurt that he believed all that about me. I told him I cared for him and wanted to talk it out civilly if he was also willing to. His only response was starting to spread the rumor not only within our class, but in the other classes as well. And that was enough of an answer for me. I no longer had any sort of lingering feelings for him. In fact, I kind of liked another boy at this point, and still kind of do, but I did want the rumor spreading to stop. It was getting to the point where my class was taking sides in the conflict. One of my current best friends in the whole world was one of the people to believe the rumor, and I remember a heated accusation from him about it that really affected me at the time. Obviously, we are well past that now, we're best friends. One of my close friends I've known since first grade, who was good friends with Bob at this time, eventually cut ties with him to support me in my struggle against the rumor spreading. I found lots of comfort in him, as well as his other friends, including my crush, and I don't know what I would have done without him. Honestly, I love him so much. He's such a good friend to me. Despite my gratefulness for his support, it made me sad that the situation had more or less ruined his friendship with Bob. Each side of the conflict was getting more and more heated, even with Ava's mom going as far as telling the principal that I'd apparently yelled at Ava in the hall. I don't think the authorities bought it, not gonna lie. They've known me since kindergarten. As you can probably tell, this whole thing was a bit more than just some typical middle school drama at this point. We told the teachers what was happening, and they tried their best to put an end to it all. A class meeting was held, revolving around the consequences of rumor spreading. The whole meeting, Bob was progressively looking more guilty. I'm happy to say after that, I heard nothing more of the rumor. However, that wasn't nearly the end of it. It's a middle school class, so of course the entire thing was forgotten within a couple weeks, if not less. All was peaceful for a couple months, until the last couple weeks of school rolled around. About this time, Ava brought up the earlier conflict to me again. It was not a hostile interaction, though. She actually apologized for her previous actions. She explained to me that she'd made everything up to get rid of her uncomfortableness that came from me liking Bob. I kindly explained how I would have preferred to talk it out with her, and if she told me her real feelings, I would have respected them and taken them into account in future interactions with her. I soon forgave Ava, though. I knew I couldn't be her friend again, but I respected her as a person. I do not respect her past actions, but I do respect her as a person because I know people can change. And Ava, well, her apology was genuine. I'm happy to say we've officially made amends, and I don't think anything like that will ever happen again. However, during the last few weeks of the school year, Bob took a very different approach towards me. I noticed that he started continually looking at me throughout the day, and every time I looked back at him, or even so much as glanced in his direction, he would make a little mark on this paper he'd started carrying around. It didn't take much detective work to figure out he was keeping track of how many times I was looking at him, as his behavior was consistent. Thing is, to know whenever I glanced over at him, he'd have to be staring at me constantly. A bit hypocritical when you think about it. Who's the stalker now, Bob? Anyway, this obviously made me very uncomfortable. I told my school counselor of my suspicions, and she was shocked at what was happening. She said she talked to my teachers, Bob's mom, and even maybe the authorities about this behavior. Not even an hour later, my suspicions were only confirmed. We were having a science model showcase that day, and some other classes as well as parents were stopping by to see it. One of the classes that visited us contained one of Bob's friends that was in our class last year. He's a year older than us, so he moved up into a higher grade class. This friend, we'll call him Ian, stopped by my model I'd made with a couple friends. Ian had never shown any hostility towards me, not that school year and not ever really, so I thought it would be fine. I showed him our model, explaining each part. While I did so, he watched with an oddly amused expression. Turns out, he hadn't stopped by for our model after all, because after my explanation, he looked at me and said, "Bob's been keeping a tally of how many times you look at him. Did you know that?" I would have liked it better if he'd screamed the words, because the smug and amused tone in which he spoke was much worse. My childs, I never get mad. I may get upset, disappointed, etc., because mad is a strong word. But I will tell you, right at that moment, I was flaming mad. I regret my reaction a bit, but I'm telling the whole unfiltered story. I told Ian I was aware of this behavior and hinted scathingly for him to leave our station. He did, wide-eyed, and straight after I went to the counselor to give her the update. I believe she did discuss it with some of the authorities, but that's really all I know. My mom, who was there for the showcase, told Bob to keep his paper away. He nervously agreed, not having to ask her to specify because he was already aware what paper she was talking about. The day in which all this happened was the second to last day of school, so nothing much really happened after that. Bob isn't going into my class next year, so I hope that means no more trouble from the boy I used to like so much. And, well, that was the time my crush thought I was a stalker. This story is 100% true. Nothing in this story time was made up. These are the events that occurred just as I remember them. What you should take away from this story is something isn't always what it seems. Rumors can spread like rapid fire, and you shouldn't always believe them. And you should always stick up for yourself in a healthy way. If you ever need help from your parents or teachers, don't be afraid to ask. They're there to help you after all. And lastly, forgiveness is important. It's not impossible for people to change and feel remorse for their past actions. Everyone has some light and dark inside of them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Let me know if you've experienced anything like this in the comments below. Bye, my childs.